It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, a trailblazer in the fight against Islamophobia and a powerful advocate for human rights, Amira Elghawaby. Amira serves as Canada's Special Representative on Combatting Islamophobia. She is a dedicated journalist, human rights advocate, and communications professional with over 2 decades of experience in promoting diversity and inclusion. Her work consistently challenges stereotypes and promotes greater understanding across communities. Today, she will speak on a topic that is both timely and critical: Islamophobia and leadership challenges for Muslim women in Canada. As Muslim women, we face unique hurdles in leadership due to the intersecting layers of discrimination and bias. These challenges often make it difficult to not only head, but also to thrive in our personal and professional lives. Amira will shed light on the current state of Islamophobia in Canada, how it disproportionately affects Muslim women, and the role that leadership plays in combating these issues. She will also share insights into how we can empower ourselves and our communities to stand against hatred and bigotry. Please join me in welcoming Amira Elghawaby to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. What a pleasure it is to be with all of you today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of a beautiful Vancouver weekend to be here, though it's an incredible space as well. So just such a lovely opportunity to sit with all of you. It is truly an honor to be here as the keynote speaker for this gathering, which empowers Muslim women here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm also grateful to be here on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and I hope I've pronounced those properly, nations. Truth and reconciliation is a shared responsibility, and certainly it is absolutely critical for our communities to demonstrate our commitment to truth, to reconciliation, to justice for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. And so our solidarity matters, and I think it's really important that tomorrow we all do what we can in our own families and our own communities to really mark this important moment in our calendar. Thank you so much for providing me with the opportunity to engage with the pressing need to combat Islamophobia. Tanweer laid it out really well, Fatima in her introductions as well. It is very timely and important. I'm very pleased that the Foundation for a Path Forward and the BC Muslim Women's Forum has identified this opportunity to bring us together and discuss these issues. So this forum is coming on the heels of recent numbers from Statistics Canada, which demonstrate that there is indeed a rising and distressing increase in hate crimes in our communities. For the 3rd year in a row, incidents of hate have been going up. They rose by 32% in 2023 compared to the previous year. I looked at Vancouver's numbers. There's a similar rise of about 30% of hate crimes here. A main driver of the increase overall has been hate incidents targeting and motivated by religion, which have increased on that category by 67%. And for Muslims in particular in Canada, hate crimes have risen by a staggering 94% in 2023. Plain and simple, this data reaffirms what many of us know, that Islamophobia is a real and dangerous problem in Canada. Though I do have to take a moment to share with you that the vast majority of hate crimes are underreported. Victims often fear coming forward. They fear further victimization. They have low trust in police services, or sometimes don't even realize that they have been targeted in a hate crime. So I know that we have officers from Vancouver Police Department who are with us. They'll maybe wave at everyone. And I do hope that you take an opportunity to meet with them, because we have a responsibility to raise awareness about the importance of reporting. If we don't report, we can't identify the issue, and if we can't identify the issue, we can't address the problem. So even when victims report to police, though, I'll also note that not always they're listened to or heard or their reports are taken seriously, and that is ongoing communication and training that we need to see happening within police services. Though I will note as well here in BC, you have something pretty special. You have an Islamophobia hotline that is available to you, available for victims to call, and I hope that no one becomes a victim. Like I say all of this realizing that no one wants to be victimized, but if you are victimized, it's important that you know that you're not alone and that you have support. Because make no mistake, hate crimes are message crimes. They are intended not only to harm the victim, but to harm the entire community that's targeted. They send a message that we do not belong, and our message back has to be that we absolutely belong, we belong here, and we are not going to allow anyone to make us feel otherwise. Beyond hate crimes and hate incidents, Islamophobia can impact Muslims in a variety of ways, in their everyday interactions at work, at school, or in the public space. For example, last night I met with a group of Muslim women, some who are here, and I heard examples where women were describing hearing comments at work that were hurtful. And how much that, you get used to it perhaps, but why should we ever get used to that kind of treatment? Why accept that? We should not accept that, and our children should not accept that. And we need to keep working together for a society that completely has a zero tolerance for hate and exclusion for any one of us, for any community. Now, according to Canada's anti-racism strategy, I just want to give you the definition of Islamophobia. It refers to racism, to stereotypes, to prejudice, fear, or acts of hostility directed towards individual Muslims or followers of Islam in general. And in addition to these acts of intolerance and racial profiling, Islamophobia can also lead to viewing and treating Muslims as a greater security threat on an institutional or societal level. Now, these sentiments have real consequences, ones that go much deeper than the recent hate crimes numbers I've mentioned. In fact, Canada has the heartbreaking distinction of having the highest number of deadly hate-motivated attacks against Muslims of any G7 country. In 2017, many of you will recall how 6 worshippers were gunned down in Quebec City. In 2020, we saw a volunteer caretaker who was stabbed to death in front of the doors of a Toronto mosque. And in 2021, a family of 5, known fondly as Our London Family, was out for an evening walk when they were deliberately hit by an individual who was later found guilty of terrorism in a historic verdict. The 9-year-old boy left orphaned is now in the care of his extended family. I just want us to take a quick moment now to remember all those who were lost to this Islamophobic deadly attacks. These terrible tragedies came after years of our community's warning officials that Islamophobia was reaching dangerous levels, but we were often ignored or dismissed. Following the attack on Our London Family, Canadian Muslim organizations and leaders had had enough and called on the federal government to act, and it did. It convened an Islamophobia summit during which communities made over 100 recommendations to all levels of government to address this frightening rise in Islamophobia, including the recommendation to create this office, an office to combat Islamophobia at the federal level. It has a large mandate which at its core is about the freedom to practice one's faith, a right that is protected in our country's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in the Canadian Human Rights Act, and in various provincial human rights codes. The freedom to practice one's faith is a cornerstone of a healthy democracy, and it's fundamental to our human rights. Yet, as many of you are innately aware, ensuring those rights are upheld is a daily struggle, never more so than now. Since October 7th, we have also witnessed a distressing surge in not only Islamophobia, but anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism and hate. The National Council of Canadian Muslims reported a 1,300% increase in Islamophobic incidents in the weeks following October 7th. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue found that online hate targeting Muslims went up by 422% online. Since the beginning of the Gaza war and throughout this past year, many in our communities report feeling silenced, scared, and their sense of belonging threatened. There are examples of students, staff, faculty on university and college campuses who have faced negative consequences for speaking out on the issue of Palestinian human rights, as well as professionals who have faced negative repercussions, including being terminated for their stance in support of international humanitarian law. For Muslim women, this fear is even greater, given the additional challenges that we face for being both Muslim and women. Many Muslim women in Canada are reliving the trauma from the post-9/11 era as they bore the brunt of Islamophobic attacks, rhetoric, and dehumanization back then. Muslims, and specifically Muslim women, are constantly under scrutiny, the subject of persistent, divisive political rhetoric and the subject of fear-mongering. The physical and psychological safety of Muslim women, particularly those who are visibly Muslim with a hijab, is continuously threatened. Over this past year, Canadian Muslim women in hijab have been spat on, assaulted, their hijabs torn off. Just this past week, as Tanweer mentioned, 2 Muslim women in London, Ontario were threatened. A knife was pulled out on them by an individual who has since been charged. On top of that, we know that Muslim women continue to face systemic barriers in education, healthcare, the broader workforce, and in public life due to discriminatory attitudes and practices. For instance, new research from the Canadian Council of Muslim Women shows that in spite of highly qualified Muslim women, they are still underemployed at higher rates than general women in the broader population. This demonstrates the multiple layers of discrimination and disadvantage that we as women face on the basis of race, faith, and gender. The compounded challenges linked to our intersectional identities is especially heightened, again, for those of us who wear the hijab. And to be honest, and here I'm going to shift a little bit, just to share with you how deeply hurt many of us feel when we realize these realities. Because when I was a journalism student, over 25 years ago, I had never even heard of the word Islamophobia, let alone gendered Islamophobia, or the specific hardships of Muslim women. Growing up in Ottawa as a child and later as a teenager, the idea that I could even be discriminated against because of my faith was not something I had imagined could happen. I had drunk what I've come to call the multicultural Kool-Aid. You may have tried it yourself. And I had actually experienced many positive interactions growing up, being of various diverse identities. Yet, when I decided in university to start to wear the hijab, just a short time before 9/11 even happened, it was my father who warned me. He said to me, "This is going to set you up for some discrimination. I don't think you should do it." He tried to discourage me from wearing the hijab. People are often surprised because of the stereotype that it's men who force women to wear hijab versus the reality that Muslim women have agency and make their own choices every day. Yet I told my dad back then, if I can't wear the hijab in a country like Canada, which is pluralistic, which says that it supports human rights for all, where else in the world could I do it? Yet sadly, until now, we see how Islamophobia has become part of our day-to-day lives in ways that we never could have imagined or anticipated. And now all of us are committed to fixing this, to working with our allies, some who are in this very room, to fix the issue of hate and discrimination, not just against our communities, but against other communities as well. Because these harmful attitudes go to the heart of what it means to live in a democratic country like Canada. It harms our social fabric, and they have become core ingredients of polarization. Global events, including the war in the Middle East, are exacerbating all of this at this time. And once again, we find our communities in a spotlight that no one asked for, which casts a pall of suspicion on us, where we see demonstrations for Palestinian human rights as described as terrorist demonstrations, terrorist supporters, Hamas supporters, when of course they are all about standing up for the rights and the human rights of Palestinian people. And of course, we are also now seeing what is happening in Lebanon. All of this threatens our civil liberties and our right to freedom of expression. So we are not going to allow this to take the narratives from us. And as Tanweer said, we are going to reclaim our narratives. And the vision is simple. Canada must be a place where everyone, including Muslims, are able to participate in every aspect of society while freely practicing their faith and expressing diverse identities without fear, without hate. I'm going to briefly share a few examples of solutions that I hope that many of you will get to know more about. The federal government is working to lead this work on how to provide better support for organizations to address racism. Just last week, the Government of Canada launched its action plan to combat hate, which complements its anti-racism strategy. Both these initiatives provide funding opportunities that I hope you will explore through the Department of Heritage. And today I'm accompanied by Ruchi Gill, who I'll ask her to take a stand. She is a senior program advisor from the Department of Heritage and who can help support your initiatives on combating hate and addressing anti-racism. Now, my office works to complement this effort and hoping to influence the government along three key outcomes. Number one, Muslims must live lives of dignity and enjoy their charter rights free of discrimination. Two, we must tackle online and offline hate to ensure everyone's safety. And three, we must eliminate anti-Muslim bias within the federal public service. This work has led to some notable accomplishments that are having already benefits for Muslims in Canada. Last fall, we embarked on a crucial initiative to bolster Canada's current toolbox on combating Islamophobia by launching a practical guide on understanding anti-Muslim hate crimes. As I was sharing with members of the BCMA Women's Council last night, there are 10 practical steps for police services that I encourage you to become familiar with and to raise with your local police services, available on our website. We also launched a digital toolkit and posters showcasing Muslim Canadian diversity to promote Canadian Islamic History Month, which starts in a few days. I encourage, again, all of you to download and print these posters and encourage their display in schools and workplaces throughout the month. This year, we are celebrating generations of Canadian Muslims, and you will also find posters from last year available, which mark the contributions of Muslim women and girls. Our office is also working on a number of other key resources, including a national guide on understanding and combating Islamophobia. I encourage you all to subscribe to our office's newsletter so that you do not miss an update and become champions in your own communities and your own spaces. Now, despite all of the challenging times that we find ourselves in, I still do look for optimism and I do look for hope. And a room like this is why I can find it. I truly believe that Canada's diversity remains our greatest strength, and there will always be more that unites us than divides us. And what brings me hope is to see community organizations and courageous Muslim women like all of you here, like the women we're going to hear from, who are actively working to combat Islamophobia through education, outreach, and advocacy. Before concluding, I want to encourage all of you, all fellow Muslim women leaders in the audience, to continue participating in these discussions, accept leadership positions, work for both women's rights as well as the broader community and with other communities as well, to advocate for our shared values. Your voices, your views and experiences matter, and they are important to decision makers. Do not allow hatred and discrimination to silence your invaluable voices and your lived experiences. Why? Again, we belong. No one is going to tell us otherwise. Thank you so much.